Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm Emily Moyer and this is AIchemical Insiders. It has been about 6 months since I have done an episode with the Krimis, and there's a couple of reasons for that, mainly being the absolute crazy shit show the world has been, and there's so many topics to get distracted with that sometimes you get away from the basic building blocks of our reality, which is kind of what we discuss with them. And then also the next topic we decided that we wanted to cover here is an incredibly complex one that we have toyed around with how we wanted to do this for like a really long time, and it just like seemed almost impossible to figure out the right way to do it. So what we just decided is that we were going to make it like a very casual, like more like live research or study session. And what we wanted to talk about was the work of a gentleman named Gabriel Keleman, who I became familiar with this past summer when I took a course at the Vesica Institute. He is from Romania, and he is a very, very brilliant scientist and artist, and his work is incredible. And generally I would reach out to someone for an interview, but we struggled to understand. He speaks very, very quickly and has such a instinctive, natural understanding of the topics that he's talking about that like it's impossible for someone who doesn't also have that level of understanding to really keep up with what he is saying. And so we decided, rather than trying to do an interview with him, that we would just kind of, dive into some of his, papers and work, the stuff that's publicly available anyway, in a show, with the hopes that people who are interested in this topic, because it's fascinating, will go check out his work. But we also decided before we started today that it's so complex that we needed a primer session. So today we're going to talk a little bit about projective geometry, plants, and vortices as like a building block lesson to be able to talk about Gabriel Keleman's work in a future episode. So we're going to do that here in the first public segment, and then the Krimis shared some related, sort of connected and related information on the heart with me, and we're going to do a patron segment on the heart. So Krys and Steve, it's been a while. You and I chat all the time. You guys, we chat all the time, and you've been several times at the group chats and the health chats and whatnot. So some of our patrons have seen you, but it's been a while since we've done a show. So welcome back. How you doing this morning?
Thanks, Emily. We're never better.
Yes, we're as Maslow would say, we're peaking right now.
Well, you've hit the big time when you start receiving hate mail, and you're receiving it. You guys have.
You're in the club, Emily. You're in the club. we're the couple they love to hate.
Right. We used to be holier than thou, but
yeah,
now, the reaction has come in.
All right. So you guys sent me some interesting emails where you had kind of created some primers to the Keleman work. Let me go back and look at my little list here. Let's see. It's weird what my computer did. So let's start with, you sent me some information about a book called Plants Between, it's called Between.
The Plant Between the Sun and the Earth.
Okay.
This lovely book.
Okay.
By George Adams and Olive Witcher, which I happened to pick up back in New York in the 1980s, mid 1980s, because I'm a plant person. And I thought, wow, this is really interesting. And apparently they're Steinerians.
Not surprising.
Yeah, I think George Adams is actually one of the better translators of Steiner. One of the problems with reading Steiner is that most of the translations of him are just stultified and abysmal. They just don't, it doesn't sound like it's really hard to connect in with them. George Adams' translations are a little better.
But this was my entree into sacred geometry because I had never been exposed to it really. I think you had Lawler's book that came out.
Well, we were doing something with carpets. That's how.
Yeah. So we knew that it existed, and Lawler's book was the first one that we really came across.
Robert Lawler,
focusing on sacred geometry, and then this book popped up, and I was interested because of the plants and what it is. it works with projective geometry, if like a subfield of sacred geometry. And projective geometry, the way it was described to me, is that it's the geometry of living things.
Mhm.
So it gives you a framework and a visual understanding for how plants, how are they, what are the formative forces, which isn't going to be a Steinerian term, right? What are the formative forces that bring plants or anything into existence? And how do they move up into these vortices as they're growing? And then what are the geometries that are the lattice work that they're growing into?
Okay.
So the question that I read somewhere, Gabriel Keleman asking himself, which is the basic question of sacred geometry studies: how do you get from the absolute into manifestation?
Yeah, I think he called it the geometry of manifestation. When we were listening to him, he's like, that's
Okay.
referring to the geometry of manifestation.
And that's always the question,
and that's
isn't
what
it?
it is, right?
What's the nodal point?
And so, unless you're a pure biological physicalist, you're stymied, because you can only get so far with the complete physical model, right? You can't come up with a physical model for consciousness. You can't come up with a physical model for the soul. You can't come up with a physical model of how things get to where they're going. You can't come up with a physical model of how a vine knows there's a branch over there to go to.
Right.
So that's at the basis of his work, and he, and maybe when we do him, we can get into some of the cymatics visuals,
Mhm.
because that's how frequency gets involved in with it. But so that's at the basis of his work. So how do you get from the absolute, which is pure potential, which all the sacred traditions talk about in some form or another, into manifestation? What's the structure of that? Because the geometry that we've done before with you is more static lines, planes, etc., and that gets you to where you can understand. But this is taking it to a sort of like a 3D level, really, of and motion. So actually 4.
Right.
So you're bringing in motion, fluid dynamics,
Which means time.
and how that actually works with the etheric. So some of these drawings will kind of show you how that works, maybe, that we were talking about, right?
Yeah, because remember, was it Keith Critchlow who said, maybe he was quoting someone else, time is the moving image of eternity. Plato. So he was quoting Plato.
Yeah.
So that the projective geometry, because it is a moving, living geometry, it involves time.
So this is basically in your book. Is it basically detailing the from seed to plant, right? That all that activity that occurs between seed. I don't know if there's how it works, like with the seed, like what is the geometry to manifest the seed? But what I noticed when I was looking at most of Gabriel's work during the course was like it was very much like embryo, human, seed, flower, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is kind of like tracking the evolving geometry of that journey, right? That's kind of okay.
Right. So what you learn from the plant side of things is that there is an etheric that everything moves into.
Yeah, right? And can I just show then, since you were talking about seed moving into, let's say, just into the cotyledon, the first true leaves of the plant, but this is an image that they have.
Okay.
Does that show up?
Let me see. You sent me some. Is it in the pictures you sent me?
So this would be the movement of the seed into the plant itself.
Okay. Is this one? This
no,
is not okay.
I don't think that one sent you. I think I sent you like 7 of them.
Okay.
But
I can pull some of the. Let me know when you want the ones you sent me to pull up, and I'll screen share those. Okay. I don't have the one you just showed, but yes, we could see it.
Does that show up at all? And is that were you able to see that?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay.
So yeah, so in the really basic level, so everyone kind of knows that a vortex is very much involved in manifestation, but so what happens is a plant will grow. You put the seed in the ground, but already there is an etheric vortex that the plant grows into. In other words, so that's really a basic understanding. So the form is there in the etheric,
Okay.
or in the imaginal, or however you want to term it. And the plant does not grow like this, but the
No.
plant grows like this.
Yeah.
Oh, here's a great shot. Did you exclude?
I showed that one. Yeah. So if you can
Did
pull
you
up
give
the
that to
image of the
Emily?
vortex or something like that.
Okay.
That might be.
Yeah, if you have the spiral cone in a plant.
This
That's
one?
it.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
There you go. And that's really helpful. So when I look at a plant, there are certain plants that express this more explicitly than others. So something like canna with those big broad leaves, and dracaenas that come and they have these leaves that sort of unfold out from a central stem,
Mhm.
not branch out, but unfold like napkins. You can see it very clearly. And when you look straight down onto the plant, you can see the spiral vortex that the leaves are making around this central stem. And you get a really good picture of what this is depicting in real life. And then it's just like you're awestruck. And then you can imagine, so like in projective geometry, you would imagine that cone going out into infinity. There is no limitation really to they're drawing the top of the cone so you can see it and understand it visually. But etherically and energetically, that cone goes out into infinity and never stops. And then imagine it intersecting with anything else that has those geometries.
Right.
Yeah, it reminds me very much. So first of all, it reminds me a lot of the way that I draw the Earth, which is like a disc with the toroid around it, and then a cone going, out the top and down the bottom. So there's
Right.
another cone coming out the bottom here that you can't see all of in the picture. But it
Right.
also reminds me very much of like an accretion disk, which is what planets and black holes and like galaxies and stuff are formed from. Let me show you if I
I'm
can.
not familiar with that.
Right. So it looks like this, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's very similar.
Right. So yeah, so all of this,
Huh.
sort of, this is what we're looking. We're definitely getting the alphabet of
Like right here, this one
formation.
is very good. Like it.
That's excellent.
Yeah, it's very simple. It's almost exactly the same. And this
Right.
is right. So it's a black hole's accretion disk. It's the structure inside of it.
And what's the middle place called in the plant?
Oh, the crown presentiment.
It's called the crown presentiment. The word crown again.
Yeah.
But in a plant, that middle point between the upward movement, the phototropism, as it's called, and the geotropism, which is the same movement going down, is called the crown presentiment.
So gardeners will know that, like in the instructions that you get when you buy a
crown
plant.
I like that crown
Presentiment, like pre-sentiment, right?
Yeah.
Before the sentiment.
That's what Alan Chadwick called it.
But when you get instructions from the nursery to plant this, make sure that the crown is at ground level.
Okay.
And that is that intersection point.
And yeah, if you bury it, like especially with roses, apparently if you bury that crown, they will not do well at all.
And strawberries, you can see it very easily in strawberries. If you put that up too high or too low, you have a problem.
Okay. So carry on.
Yeah. So you want to move to the next?
Oh, and here, well, hold on a minute.
Yeah.
So I didn't even realize. So on the very next page, there is that's the canna plant. And that's pretty familiar to most people.
Hold on a second. I'm trying to go back to the email that has all the other pictures in it. All right, now I can look at what you're showing me. Go ahead and talk so you become big on the screen.
Okay, so this is what I was trying to describe. This canna plant really exhibits those properties of unfolding like a napkin. But if you were to look straight down onto that, you see that central stem, that it's the leaves are actually wrapped tightly around that when it first comes up. And it comes up like a spear, like asparagus does, like a spear up out of the ground. So it's got this formative force that is a projectile that's extremely powerful. And it cuts through all of the soil. And then it goes and it opens out into the vortex.
Excellent. Okay.
Yeah, and they all open up, within, or the nodes of them are all, Fibonacci sequence numbers and what have you. Things like that.
And hopefully most people are familiar with that.
Yeah, so yeah, maybe
Fibonacci.
pull up the next thing. Maybe we can just bounce off of them.
Do we need to at least be kind and explain to people who may not know what Fibonacci sequence is?
Sure. Let's see.
Not make assumptions, since this is
All right.
introductory. You want to talk about, you explain it because
Oh,
it's
thank
numbers.
you. Yeah.
I know about it, but I'm not good with numbers.
No, so Fibonacci sequence is a sequence of numbers where you add the one to the one before. So 1 + 1 is 2, then 2 you go back to 1 is 3, 3 + 2 is 5, 5 + 3 is 8. So it's 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, then 13, 21, and what happens 34. And so what happens is, as that sequence moves on, it gets closer and closer to the actual the actual phi, which is the golden mean, which is 1.618 ... on and on. But what happens, each one of those numbers, the ratios like 3 to 5 and then 5 to 13, is a little higher and a little lower, and it just moves and gets closer and closer, and that, on and on and on. So, but what it is, it's the golden mean,
Oh, stop
what's
there,
called a-
Emily. Stop there with the sunflower.
so
That's
that's
the
a
best.
55 and 88, 55 and 89. I forget those. In other words, those
One way and then the other.
sunflower seeds go 55 one way and 89 the other way.
Okay.
Right? Pine cones use 8 and 13 in their numerical sequence. So basically, what it is. So since the golden mean ratio is actually called a transcendental number, right? It's not a number that you find in this world. The numbers 8, the ratios of 8 to 13, et cetera, you find in this world in plant. In other words, it's a physical world of approximation of the transcendental world upon which this is built.
Okay.
I hope that was relatively
Right.
clear.
So is it accurate?
Thanks for putting me on the spot.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, better you than me. They'd be totally confused if I tried to tell them. All right. Is it accurate to say that a transcendental number does not resolve? So you can observe it in nature, or is that the Fibonacci? You can observe it in nature,
Oh.
but you can't resolve it numerically.
The transcendental numbers,
Right.
like pi, square root of 2, square root of 3,
So that
square root
brings
of
it
5.
into the realm of very refined spirituality, right? It's not in the material plane. So you can find it
Right.
in the plants, but you
Right.
cannot find it
And-
mathematically.
And that's why these are the ratios that are used in temple building and all that sort of stuff.
Because it elevates
Because
you
you
to a finer.
resonate with those harmonies, which are harmonies are always ratios, and done in frequency. So you resonate with those rather than, bookstore ratios.
Box stores. Yeah, I like to use that analogy. Like, why do you feel differently when you step inside a bank or a Walmart or a big box store than you do when you enter into a medieval cathedral? So when you walk into a cathedral, those are all built on the numericals and the ratios that are in harmonic with the human body. So the ratios are the same. And then your body literally goes into resonance with that architecture. And the opposite is true. So it literally goes into resonance with a box store architecture, and you feel exhausted when you come out. And there's, that's just physics. That's the way it is. So that's why it's helpful to understand about these geometries and what they actually do to us. It's like understanding how radiation affects your blood,
Yeah.
and when you use a cell, it's that kind of knowledge that gives you an internal landscape.
Right. And then it's used against us because for example, credit card is almost a perfect golden mean rectangle.
Okay.
So, and that rectangle is scientifically proven to be the most pleasing rectangle to humans.
It's very easy to
And
use
so
that card.
you just go and here, boom, 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 boom. You feel perfectly comfortable with it, right? If it was if it was a cube, it might be a whole other story. You know?
Right? Yeah, it would be weird if the credit card was a different shape. Okay, very good. Carrying on. So
All right, yeah, carry on.
So we asked for, I think you decided to define the Fibonacci sequence, and I can't remember why.
I don't know, but we were going on to the next.
That was me. I just thought that
Okay.
when I was entering into this stream of learning, when we
Yeah.
moved here to Asheville, I really felt like it, it was way above my head and I couldn't possibly understand this. I flunked out of geometry in high school, I went down in flames. So I felt totally, just not understanding. So there could be someone in the audience who doesn't have the background.
Oh,
and
yeah, no. I know why you did it. I just couldn't remember what we were doing it in service of, and now
I see.
it was this. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
You talked about the seed, and then it came
Yeah.
with the seed.
Okay, yeah. So this is another. I think this is a flower
Mhm.
petal opening. I think, is there a third one on the bottom, or is it just these two? I only see two. Okay,
No,
right,
there's a third one. There's one,
right,
two,
Right.
three.
right. And there's,
Okay, good.
It's interesting how this one looks like an ear.
It does, or
Yeah.
a pear,
Yeah.
or a light bulb.
Yeah, light bulb. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry I interrupted.
Go ahead.
Oh, what? What next?
Metamorphosis of the luminosity. Or
No.
Lemn-
Lemniscatory. So a lemniscate. So the metamorphosis of a lemniscate being expressed.
Okay.
You can see it right here in the middle one. You see the lemniscate? They've even overdrawn it.
Right.
Which one?
On top of that, see, it's the bud, really. It's the bud formation.
Well, the middle one. So in other words, lemniscate. You can even see they've drawn the lemniscate in there, which is the figure 8, which is the
Oh, I see it. I see it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I get it.
And
So
there it is above, more fully expressed as the plant is developing and opening and
yeah,
showing its
okay,
petals.
got it.
right.
And then just go down a wee bit to the beginning.
So everything starts really circular.
I see it. So I see it. There's the little figure. There's
Right?
it right
It's always
there.
present.
Right.
And then
right.
they're here. I got it now. Okay, I see it.
Yeah, so it's very cool. So everything starts circular, and then there are what Keleman loves. He loves the invaginations, right? And his is like invagination on invagination on invagination, turning into vortexes going in different directions. And that's when you get to that work, you see how this it complicates. But
Okay,
here, so this is why.
So
Go ahead.
lemniscate is the sort of figure 8 where the bottom part is smaller than the big part.
In this case,
Oftentimes, doesn't
Yeah.
have to be.
yeah.
All right. And can you explain also the term invagination?
Okay, right, that's just a moving, so here's a flat line, and if you invaginate, you move like this, so it's creating, what looks like a vagina.
Which
Gotcha.
is where the
Move.
word vagina comes from, and it is seen as the feminine principle.
Okay. So it's basically the sort of.
Yeah, so it's that sort of, yeah,
It's like a lock and
like
key.
an opening being made.
It's like, the movement that becomes space where life can
Gotcha.
hide, right? So then like
Right.
the seed can be planted in there. Even when you dig a hole in the earth, that's an invagination. You
Yeah.
put the seed in,
Okay.
there you go,
Right.
and then the plant
Gotcha.
comes up,
and
right?
yeah, and so what's occurring to me now is that, so you start with a circle, and then once you start doing these invaginations or meanders, things like that, you have a different type of dynamics going on, because a circular really has a wholeness to it, right? There's nothing, everything's equidistant from the
Right.
central point, right? That's the definition of a circle. But then when it morphs into sort of undulations, right? These undulations start, generating different kind of vortices, different, and we'll just keep using the word etheric because I don't know what else to call it. So, so these other forces can impinge. These formative forces can begin to work in multiple directions, and then so then it moves further. And so you see, you start with the circle, and then it gets a little more, and then you have a bud, and you have no clue all this is going on, but it's this same growth pattern and movement from
Gotcha.
flowers to, you know, to embryos, human
Right.
embryos, other animal embryos.
Okay. Yes. All right. So are we done with that one?
Yep.
All right.
Yeah, if you feel complete with it.
Well, I think it's one of these things that, like, I don't know that there's a point where you feel complete with it. I think it's like you get used to seeing this over time. Like,
Okay.
I don't know. So yeah, so it's basically there's a form and then there's, if it's alive, there's energy behind it that makes it start to want to move and grow into something else. And that point, the invagination, is the point where it starts to penetrate sort of into something else.
It
Yeah.
morphs. It doesn't penetrate
Morph,
into
okay.
something
So it
else, but it
starts to-
starts to change its form and into more and more complexity. So you go from simplicity, the
Okay.
straight line,
Right.
and you
Gotcha.
invaginate or
Right.
cavitation,
Okay.
and you
Yeah.
you move into more and more complexity. Now those cavitations and invaginations, they can continue that movement
Yeah.
and make more complexity, and that's like on a fractal level.
So only things that are alive or that have energy do that.
Mm,
Yeah. Well, yeah. Because
I can't think of a thing that isn't alive.
Yeah, 'cause
Everything's
they
in flux, everything's
Yeah,
in
right.
movement.
Yeah. So
I don't even know when you get down into the mineral kingdom how this would apply, but I'm imagining someone must have looked at that.
well, I mean, I think I think it's reasonable to say that that everything may be alive, right? Like we've been told,
Exactly.
sold the good bill of goods that, like, some things are alive and some
And
things
some
aren't.
things aren't. No, right? We know that that's
Everything
not
in
true.
nature is alive.
It's all in flux.
Right. Yeah. Okay. All right. So on to the next one.
So this is, go ahead, just so you want to describe this. So this is just a couple of ideas of what projective geometry is about.
Now,
Okay.
we were fortunate enough, we had a small geometry group here, and there was someone who brought this into class, this type of geometry, the projective geometry. I found it like going to the playground. It is so much fun.
Yep.
You just start with random dots on a piece of paper, and you connect, you run lines through those two dots. So let's say you start with 3 dots anywhere. And then you take a ruler and you connect, and then you connect the other ones. And then you see where you end up with this nice triangle, right?
Yeah.
These are formative force lines that actually, it's like out on the margins of any object. I'm not going to limit it to living. So any object that has a boundary,
Yep.
those are formative force lines that intersect and create that shape.
Mm-hmm.
They appear random. In this case, you start with 3 random dots just to learn the structure and how these things work. But everything, if I picked up a cup and I started to look at this circle on the top here, if I made all these dots around here and then if I just made a ruler and made a line and then another line and another line, and I would end up with a circle.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, if I just did another line with the ruler and pencil and another line and another line, if I just kept going like that, those formative lines have formed a circle.
Mm-hmm.
Is that clear, or is it?
Yeah, I think we have maybe some better pictures next. This one is, well, these are all showing how if you have different angles, you run something through a circle, and then those lines transform
right here.
into something else on another plane.
Circle. Here's the circle that they're running everything through.
Right, and
Right.
the line. So from a point through the circle, then you have a parabola
Okay.
on the bottom. So this is just a transformation of space, and so what Krys was talking about, a circle is not just a circle. All right, so a circle by regular geometry definition said before, it's equidistant it's a line equidistant from a point, right? Right. But if you instead made that circle with all tangential lines, right?
And no point in the middle necessarily.
If you just drew a whole bunch of tangents
guess you could say it's like
around a
working from the
circle.
outside in instead of the inside out, right? It's working from the outer edge.
So
Make them.
this is not the best of all drawings, but given that we're in a hurry, so what you have here is so if you can make a circle out of all those lines. And so you say, all right, fine, but the idea is that every circle is connected to infinity through those lines,
Yeah.
right? It's connected through the etheric into infinity through all those lines that extend forever out from them. So I think
Right.
that's the point. And then the one below here is a plane that is generated by, a series of points.
Before we go to that one, I just want to comment on this. So there's a couple of things that these two make me think of.
Mhm.
First of all, we've seen a lot of large art installation and physical space that look like versions of this, right? They're like netting that is
Oh,
pulled
right.
together. Like I think we
Right.
covered, there's a big one downtown in Phoenix. There's another one up in Scottsdale, right? And sometimes they're connected with something, but it's basically just a huge display of this projective geometry. And then of course it is generating the energy of that geometry off into the environment, right? Because but it's made with, these things are made with cables and cords and whatnot.
Yeah, yeah.
They have some netting to sort of show the angles between them and whatever. It's making me think of that, but for some reason I also keep thinking of like the circus and the tightrope and the trapeze and
Oh, right.
the acrobats
Right.
and stuff like that.
Yes.
All of the motion that circus performers need, that is all based on understanding fluid dynamics, geometry, physics, torsion fields, all of that kind of stuff, right? And so like this is like literally like a diagram of like a circus performance.
Yeah, right. So now you can never look at any of those, you'll take a line now, anytime you see like a straight line, you think, oh, where's that going? What's that doing? What is it connected to? How is that part of this grand scheme, this jeweled net of Indra?
Like
right?
I guarantee that there's like mock-up storyboards in the back room when they're creating their different versions of Cirque du Soleil that have drawings like this, drawing what the equipment is going to look like, what the performer is going to do. I mean, this looks like the angles that a trapeze swings at. This looks like a tightrope. This looks like a net that will catch the acrobat, right?
Exactly.
Like
very good.
Ladder they might climb up to get there.
Very good.
Right?
Yeah.
So
you can see like this is the underpinnings of all of that.
This is the part of the circus you never see, right? Like this is the geometry of the magic trick. This is the geometry of the magic.
Right, but when you're looking at the whole thing, now you can look at it with your X-ray vision of projective geometry. Now you have the, an inside seat to what's going on behind the show.
Yes. Okay, so on to the next one. This one is interesting here.
That's really like the jeweled net of Indra.
Yeah, it's like the jeweled net of Indra. It looks like a lot of the stuff like we see on the FPV Angel channel, but what it also reminds me of is in the psychedelic space. And I don't know if you were at the Conspiracy Cocktail where Jeff was describing some of his first experience, and he's like, everything was made up of this fabric, right? So we were having a conversation the whole time he was having this experience that there's this like fabric, and there is nothing that isn't part of it. And there's nothing that's not it.
That's right.
Right. And this to me is a really nice, like simple, like sort of diagram, because it can go on forever and ever, right? Like there is
absolutely it does.
Netting, webbing, connective node quilt that like our reality is made up of, and we are part of it, and we are it.
Exactly.
Yep. And you can see there's 5-pointed stars, there's 4s, there's 6s. And to echo Jeff, my one ayahuasca experience that was integral to it was that this fabric.
Yep.
And the fabric in my experience was a beehive moire fabric.
Yes.
So it had that shimmer of moire. Moire, is that pronounced right?
Like a watery kind of thing, moire.
And and the funny in my experience, I had a zoom function during the ayahuasca experience where I could zoom into the individual hexagram, actually really more beehive too.
Yep.
And then zoom out.
Well, that's what's amazing about it. So like totally, I have this in my psychedelic experiences, right? So like at times you're far out, you see like, let's just pretend this quilt is the visual space of the psychedelic experience, right? Only there wouldn't be necessarily an end to it. It would just be covering the whole thing. So at any point you can sort of zoom in like on a node here, which is like the lit up parts, and a whole other, it's almost like going through a black hole to a whole other reality. Or you can zoom in on one of these squares, and it's like going into a room. So like if the whole thing is like a geometric palace, and you choose to go into one of these squares, you are now in a room that is a small version of the larger thing with further detail that you can examine. Right. And the same could, and like the same could be said about any of the, you can go into the four squares, you can go into one of the stars. Within the star, you can go into any of the little tips, and there will be a slightly different, but very similar version of the overall larger thing, each with it's kind of like going into, you have a doll cabinet, right? And there's different levels, and on each level, there's different figurines, and they're all slightly different, but they're all dolls, and they're all part of the cabinet. Right, they're all part of the whole thing, and in each there's like, you know, it's like going into the different rooms in the house or examining the different books on the shelf, right, kind of thing. And they're all, so yes, the zoom in function is one of the coolest parts, because you just get fixated on something. So when you're looking at the whole thing, you look closer at one part, and then suddenly you go through that to a whole other world, and then within that there's another fabric where you can do the same thing. It's the never-ending story.
And isn't it like once you've seen this mechanism, then it's like so obvious. It's like, well, why even bother talking about it? Because like it's so obvious, you know.
Right.
Why do you even have to explain this to anybody?
Yes.
But you know, I guess there's a threshold upon which or over which you pass where you start to see the world this way.
Yes.
And once you see the world, now this is the new world that you inhabit. And that old, just like flat world that we were in before is empty and devoid, and nothing sacred about it.
Well, there's something, and when we get into the second segment where we're talking about the heart, there was something in the paper that related to like what I've kind of figured out about this phenomenon that you're talking about. So I'll expand on it when we get there, so people have the context. But so
I just want to say, go ahead. I was just going to say two things. One is the fact that it presents as a plane, but it's not. It's points and line. It's points and lines. So it's just like you know, the reality presents itself as solid. You know, but it's not.
But anything you focus on then generates a whole new geometry where that is like the center of the quilt, right? So whatever you focus on becomes the new like innermost point in the circle.
And I was actually able to make my mind say that that's a curve. That's
totally.
A curved space.
I can see it curved. Right? I can see it curved.
Yeah. And what was the other thing?
And the other thing I wanted to mention is that the earliest text we have about this is Plato's Timaeus, and he's where he gets into the geometry of creation. And one of the things that he says is that the demiurge was you know, given the task of creating this world, right? And the demi in Greek it's demiurgos, and he made the world from triangles.
That makes sense to me.
And look at this. This is all triangles.
That's the three gunas in yoga. Those are three qualities.
Yeah, this is nothing but triangles.
Nothing but different kinds, isosceles, equilateral, different kinds of triangles at different angles, right? And of course, like there looks like
there's a pentagon, but you know, you can slice it up into triangles.
I mean, there's so many forms and shapes in here, and also I think it's in the Upanishads where they talk about the warp and woof that the world is made up of. So like they relate it to weaving. So that's the nice thing about once you have these blueprints, seeing the world this way, then you can apply it to every single thing in your life.
Yes.
So they you know, sort of saw it as, because they were an agricultural society, they saw it as weaving, you know, weaving the cloth of the world.
It's just kind of like depending on which point you focus in on, then creates like a possibility of several different axes. And then from that axis point, you can generate a variety of different geometries, which would equal into perspectives or angles with which you view things. Correct?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is also why this is a universal language.
Yeah.
Because no matter where you live on the planet, you can understand this because it's part of your makeup.
Like, I actually even think that, like, I don't have time to completely tie the loop, but when we look at any of these like events, right? Like these staged events, these staged realities, there's an entire quilt that is the whole event. And then there's certain
no joke. Very good.
There's certain characters that we focus on. Let's just say that this dot right here, let's just say that this is a certain person that was wearing horns, right? Okay, and so like this is a node and it's generating off all of these sort of like points of reality around it. Within the thing that it's generating, there's this like smaller dot over here, and that might be a character that we had less focused on, who is within the geometry or all the angles being created by our horn friend, right?
Supporting actor.
Less intention, but when you zoom in on that, it also has a reality being generated from it. And this is part of mapping the confusion that is being perpetrated on unsuspecting viewers who don't understand the fabric that our reality is made of, and the geometries and the angles and the perspectives it generates.
Very well said,
Yep,
Emily.
I couldn't answer that. That's
very
great.
well said. I just
So it's like another version of mapping out the circus, right? Like, because definitely it was a circus.
Yes.
Right.
And so you have your characters and you have your props and whatever, and then you have this interplay between the angles and realities that connects them.
Yeah, and Gurumar used to say, some know it, some don't.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yes, and you could say that like maybe some of the brighter nodes are the quote unquote operatives, right? Or assets, right? And then like some of the smaller ones are ones that like, all right, like they might like they think they're doing one thing, but then they're doing another, and then even smaller, you know, but they don't know what they're really doing, and you know, whatever. And it can infinitesimally on to a little different. Yeah. So
yeah, I think I'm that little dot way in the back trying to jump off.
Well, there's one dot over here that's left the quilt, Steve.
Right.
There's a few smaller ones. Right. Yeah. All right.
But you can also see that they needed to have this framework in place in order to pull that off. So they had to already lay a grid for, you know, for people to be prepared to have this, so that they could be tricked.
Right. And kind of like if somebody inside of one of these squares steps off, well, there's another one right there for them to sort of go into. And there's a space between all like these four here, 1, 2, 3, 4 are similar, but there's a space in here that is almost like a neutral zone, but you have to go through one of the other ones to get away from there. So you're immediately going to get caught up in another like act of the play. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a hall of mirrors.
Yeah. Yeah. All right.
And you can see how people are so easily lied to.
Yeah, completely.
If you have no understanding of this mechanism and how the world works, you are really vulnerable.
Yep. Yep. All right. Let's move down to the next one.
Right. So this is more of that explanation. In other words, so the one number 27, that's a point. And so every point is an amalgamation of lines going off everywhere.
So this is more of like a 3D so this is flat. This just shows the connection between the points, and this shows the possible like angles, the orbits or the motions or the realities they can move around in, right?
Right, that revolve around a single point.
And we should get Emily a picture of our Genisa crystal. So
next time,
yeah, there is a geometric sculpture form that we have that a friend of ours made.
Oh, God.
Based on the work of Daryl Langdon.
We did a show. We made a video about it. Remember?
Oh, did we actually do it? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, maybe you could put that in the notes so people.
I'll see if I can link to it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, because that is what this is depicting. You see, we've got the shading on these circles. That indicates that's a plane. That's not empty space.
Yes.
So if you see those circles as a plane, and those planes are assigned different colors.
And they refer to the physical, the mental, and the emotional. So yeah, so it's just, these are all again more, and then the last one, of course, was the number 28 is for you, Emily.
Okay, so this is just a linear representation of this kind of same thing.
Yeah, it's just different how you get point. It's just a point, but it's only made out of lines. It's not a point.
Gotcha.
And then this one is a line made out of planes.
Yeah.
Right.
So this is the inverse of this.
Well, at least the one on the
Yeah.
right of 27,
Yeah.
especially,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
yeah. I
And
guess
so,
that one's
so if you've been talking about linear accelerators lately.
All right. Let's look at linear accelerator diagrams. Linear accelerator diagram. Let's see if I can find something that looks, like, kind of like that. Let's see. All
It
right.
sort of has fins on it, doesn't it?
And
So it's kind of a version of this here on a
right.
certain level. Let's see. I don't know if I could probably say it a different way and find exactly what you're looking at, but I don't know what the technical term for that would be because I'm a beginner at that. But this turned the other way, like on its side, maybe.
Like round discs
Right.
or fins on a pole.
Well, the thing is, I guess one of the things about it that yellow one in the middle, they all have this sort of, spinal look to them.
Yeah.
Right. Right. So they're segmented.
Mm-hmm.
And each of the segments, segment is running, running energy out from what is it, orthogonal to it? Is that the word? To a right angle.
Yeah.
Right. So there's vortices going. So there's the energy going down it, and then there's vortices at right angles to all this. And again, so we're talking about a perimeter Keleman's work. This is a lot of what he talks about. Something may be looking like it's moving directly, but it has these vortices within it.
Yeah.
This is a good example.
And impinge on it, right? Electronic.
Which one is a good example?
Go back.
Oh, okay. Let me see if I can pop up another. Hold on. I have so many windows open on my computer.
Right.
It'll take me a second to get back there. So, this is how I keep track of things that I need to talk about with people, is by just leaving the window open on my computer. But at a certain point, it becomes unfunctional.
Yeah.
Right? It's like trying to look for a phone number in the Rolodex. Which one are you talking about, Krys?
Okay, yeah, this electron accelerator and overview. So you even have the cone vortex on the left.
Middle towards the right, second from the right.
Yeah, go down.
There it is.
That one.
There it is. Okay.
Okay, so it's got that wonderful vortex,
Mm-hmm.
and then you've got the fins on the rod.
Yep.
So,
all right.
So when we get to the if we talk about the heart later, one of the problems is of it being a pump is that blood is this thick substance, and if it was just a pump, there's no way. If your vessels, apparently if you lay your vessels, all your blood vessels end to end, it wraps the earth 3 times.
Right.
And so there's absolutely zero way
that
through physics
this could get
that this little pump can do that.
Yeah.
Right. So part of understanding how that, or how the water moves up a trunk of a tree hundreds of feet, where in reality it can only go up. So there's a number of other things going on, including electrostatic kind of things going on. What do you call
the ions? Is it
differentiation?
The
Differentiation. Sorry, my technical language is not good on this, but I try. There's electromagnetism involved with it.
Yeah.
There's also, and then we'll talk about it later with the blood. It's also, the fluid is compressible.
Mm-hmm.
It moves at different speeds in the middle than it does on the ends. And so there's all sorts of dynamics going on that make it possible. And this is something we're just really, really scratching the surface on. And then, there are some scientists that are finally, getting onto this, even though apparently Leonardo da Vinci talked about this way, way back.
Right.
So. Okay, so there was a few more pictures that you shared with me as part of this. So I didn't know if you had anything you wanted to say about these. This is the microscopic sections of developing flower buds. It's interesting. This looks a lot like things we see, like some quote unquote primitive art, right? Or things that you sort of see, like when you're looking at like certain kinds of rock paintings or petroglyphs or indigenous arts or whatever, right? And there's, it looks like a lot of other things, but that's interesting that that's what it is.
Yeah, and there's so much that you can see even in this picture on the left. So you've got, to my mind, I'm seeing male and female principles embedded right in this photo or drawing, where the outer part looks very masculine and penetrating. And then when you get to the inner protected area, always, and in the dark places of wisdom, you've got what almost looks like fallopian tubes. So, and that's in this very protected cavity. So there's a cavitation and invagination that has taken place, and then it's protected by the male principle.
Well, you also see things that we've seen a lot, like in, I don't like religious or spiritual kinds of pictures, things that look like heart-shaped or hands reaching up to the sky, right? You see all kinds of things that we know of are like indicative of like connection between heaven and earth, or reaching upwards for something, which is what a plant does when it comes out of the ground. It's like, you know, reaching upwards towards the sky. You know, and there's all these metaphorical things that you can do with that in relation to spirituality and
artistic depictions of these formative forces. So like in the wings of that, looks like it could be the wings of an angel.
The wings of an angel, right? Yep.
Yeah, and the other one, and I included especially the other one because it looks a lot like Gabriel Keleman's art. You know, that sort of, you know, just overlapping and intertwining, you know, meanders and things like that. So, and his art comes right out of, you know, his art does come out of nature and comes out of what you know, what he sees.
And it's very fanciful.
You know, I mean,
it's beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, he has, you know, obviously he has a lot of vision. This is sort of the morphology from simple to complex. You know, I don't know, the water lettuce is just on the same page, I think, and the one underneath. So this is, I thought also this is real interesting too.
Yeah.
So this is kind of like cymatics, but I'm not really sure.
So they're using chemicals here.
Right. So anyway, so these are like the top left one, number 99, is formative beings revealed. So in other words, so again, we're talking about the invisible on the visible. So you have the three on the bottom are three beings, and then there is this sort of crystalline formative forces that are impinging on them. The one to its right.
Well, let's just say, so like when they add the copper chloride to the beans, it expresses the energetic impulse that's coming off those beans.
Yeah.
So that's what you're looking at.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then again, so then that's
well, this one is fascinating over here, right? It says this is the sensitive surfaces in water, but it also looks like obviously a flower. It also looks like an eye, especially if the person has central heterochromia like I do, and used to have a lot of discussion.
Oh,
it also looks like CERN. It looks like a particle accelerator, right? Or a hadron collider, right? So all of this is the doctrine of signatures, right? The in nature kind of thing, right? That, you know, that the technology all seeks to copy, right? Kind of thing, you know.
Like those could be the fins.
Copying the technology. I'm not even sure anymore what copies what.
Right. But those could be the fins around the core if you're looking straight on to the particle
linear accelerator. Yep, the particle accelerator. Absolutely. All right. And then here we go with some more of this kind of stuff.
Yeah, and those are, and again, and the one on the right is the biodynamic preparations, which is, you know, which are things that we have done since we had a farm.
Yeah.
You know, we do the biodynamic preparations, though we have kind of shifted from the standard way of using them. And then this one on the bottom, I thought was, again, is the projective geometry on
I love it.
On a leaf.
Isn't that wonderful?
I love it. I mean, it's like it goes from looking like a picture of nature to looking like a diagram that is, you know, it's like kind of, you know, when you look at the Da Vinci's painting, the Vitruvian Man. Okay, so there's a man, but then there's all this geometry laid over it that is like encoding all of this like proportions and spirituality and knowledge and whatever into something that looks like just a picture of a leaf, right?
Right. And I want to just point out, so when you're doing a drawing of projective geometry, you start usually with 3 dots, random, right? If you look at the bottom of the page, you can see 1, 2, 3 dots.
Yeah.
Through that, they drew their horizontal line, their plane, and then they just went to town and started to draw these projective lines from each
Yeah.
of the dots in those directions, and you can see how then that leaf grows up
Right.
into that lattice work.
And then,
Yep.
yeah, and then the horizontal lines are just connecting points that are already there,
Right.
you know, so you just, you know, so again, we're just seeing what's everything that impinges on what, you know, and we used to say in our yoga teacher from Calcutta, Guru Maharshi, would say a thing in itself does not exist.
Yeah.
Right? You can look at something and isolate it, but it's dependent on everything else. In Buddhism, they call it codependent origination. All right, everything arises as a whole together, and then so these is at least expressing some of the forces of connection
Yeah.
between everything. So, you know, when you say everything is one, you know, that's the experience, and you can actually see it or depict it this way.
So and again, it's another way of saying everything, there's nothing that's not part of it, and there's nothing that's not it.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so I think that's a good place to wrap up this first segment. So that was the primer for the next time we get together, where we will dig into Gabriel Keleman, and it's going to get more colorful and more complex and more confusing.
And more fun.
And more
but
fun.
guess what? If you take small bites of Kellerman, you can unpack it.
Yeah. All right. So we'll take small bites, right? And
Little nosh.
we're
We'll
gonna
have appetizers.
we're going to head over to the patron section. So if you'd like to join us, patreon.com/offplanetmedia, where we're going to get into sort of a related discussion about sort of reconsidering the heart and what it really is, how it functions, through a look at its vortices, its fluid dynamics, its the sounds that it makes, the vibrations it gives, and whatnot, that is connected to this. So if you would like to see that, come join us over there. Before we go, let everybody know where they can find you and how they can support you.
Thank you, Emily. That was grand.
No, how can they support
us? Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were just wrapping up.
I was, but where can the people find you so they can?
You can find us right here. You can find us at logosophiabooks.com. That's LOGOSOPHIA books.com.
All right, and if
you can find our books there that we've published, and my book, Katabatic Wind, which gets into a little sacred geometry amongst a lot of mythology and other things.
It's a fun book. Yeah, it's actually a book of standalone essays, so you can jump around and pick and choose.
And it's easier to understand than Keleman, but not much.
All right, excellent. And for those of you who travel the Underground Railroad and are looking for a place to stop, reach out to me and I'll let you know how you can have a stop with the Krimis. All right, guys, we'll see you on the other side. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Emily.